Hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Caroline Kewney, and for those that haven't met me, I am Senior Business Engagement Manager at the Industrial Biotechnology Innovation Centre, IBioIC, based at Strathclyde Uni in Glasgow. So I am responsible for working with our network, including all of our members, academic and funding partners. A key part of that role is to ensure that we offer support to members across the full range of offerings from the centre, including access to and support with funding opportunities, providing programme and project management, offering access to our labs and scale-up centre facilities, and supporting the skills programme offering various courses across the multidisciplinary industrial biotech sector. So as well as this, I work with public affairs and marketing to promote and market member business activities across the network and within the wider industrial biotech and bioeconomy community. So I just wanted to quickly give you a brief idea of what brought me here. My background is biopharmaceuticals, so supporting a range of clients through the full drug development process. So in that field of biotechnology, biological materials ranging from perhaps mammalian or bacterial cell banks and virus seed stocks to human organ or blood donations, they can be used as start materials to manufacture profitable drug products like vaccines, monoclonals, recombinant proteins or cell and gene therapy products. So just taking a real step back from that and looking at the bigger picture, the steps involved in that process involve a huge amount of combined effort and collaborative work. And that includes not limited to scientists within academia and industry, quality control and quality assurance to ensure the uniformity and safety and efficacy of drugs, clinicians and clinical trials working with patients and regulatory compliance and input, as well as a whole host of expertise across the biomanufacturing sector. It's by no mean feat to go from R&D at lab bench scale like that to large scale manufacturing for any biopharmaceutical. So thinking about things like scale up, downstream processing and process validation of manufacturing processes and small scale biomanufacturing for clinical trials, it is a challenge, and it's made so much easier with a combined effort and really great collaboration. So that's been exemplified recently in the development of the COVID-19 vaccine. So I joined IBioIC in April of this year to offer support for that type of collaborative approach to the centre and to the industrial biotech sector. So we as a centre aim to support the collaboration between industry and academia and government to meet and address the challenges posed in reaching the targets that have been set for IB and using renewable biological resources, and that could be from land or from sea, to produce a variety of higher value products like food, materials and energy. So with that overall goal and key topic of collaboration in mind, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. We are looking forward to the discussion on what IBioIC has been up to this year and what we can expect in 2021. So just before we actually kick off, general housekeeping for the event is that, as a reminder, our running order, I'll just be next up interviewing our CEO Mark, and later on there'll be a Q&A session where you can ask questions directly to both Mark and myself. So there's still plenty of time to submit your questions in advance for the Q&A later in the chat box, or to my colleague Debbie. She'll pop her email address up in the chat box. We will be recording the webinar and we'll be publishing it on our brand new website launched recently. And we will be doing a wee poll at the end. So that's just one question towards the end of the session. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mark Bustard, who took up position as IBioIC CEO in February this year. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks, Caroline, and afternoon, everybody. It's I'd like to say it's nice to see you, but it's nice to know you're there, I guess, is the best we can do in this environment. So yeah, we decided we would have a bit of a talk through some of the high points this year rather than generate those lovely paper brochures that get sent out and sit around on coffee tables gathering dust. So thanks for showing an interest. And as I say, I joined in February as CEO, and I guess it's fair to say I didn't anticipate things running the way that they've run, but then the rest of the world didn't anticipate that either. So challenging times, but also great times. And you know, that I've really enjoyed working in the organization and the team. have done admirably in terms of what's been achieved in the lockdown period since March. And in case I forget at the end, I think it's nice just to say up front, thanks to my team, without whom none of this is possible, and who give 110% all the time to make things happen. So thank you, team. And it's all about the teamwork and the collaboration, as Caroline says. So yeah, we'll talk through some of the things that have happened this year, and hopefully we'll get a few questions at the end that will be interesting as well. So fire ahead, Caroline. Be gentle.
Okay, easy and gently. How are you, and how has 2020 been for IBioIC?
Yeah, I think we've spoken about this on a couple of guest seminars as well. It's quite a challenge for organizations that are not used to working remotely or working in isolation to suddenly flip towards that. And so you need to make sure that everybody is safe and well and equipped in the appropriate way, and that is absolutely critical. And check in on the well-being and so on. And everybody on this call their organizations will, I'm sure, have had similar approaches to it. But since being responsible for everybody, I like to make sure that everybody is well, healthy, and actually performing as best they can. So from that perspective, yes. And from the other perspective, I guess, we delivered a fantastic annual conference at the start of February, which was, I think, the second week I was in post. Over 500 people at the TIC in Glasgow, some fantastic sessions and speakers, and a great networking dinner. And then shortly after that, we didn't appreciate how quickly things would shut down. And so sort of third week of March, we all made the decision that we would exit our buildings and laboratories, and have to appreciate that was the way everybody was going. So yeah, significant change in the model and how we operate.
There's been a change in the model, and clearly people have noticed that the team's changed as well. So there's lots of new faces at IBioIC. Excuse me.
Yes, and I guess what was happening when I came in was that we had flipped from a phase 1 business plan to a phase 2 business plan. And the people that had been involved right from the outset had maybe decided that they wanted to further their careers and do other things as well. So there was a very clear transition. And so we operated for a while where we did have quite a number of gaps in the organization, but very quickly we identified what sort of skills and people we would like to bring into the organization to give us the best chance of delivering the phase 2 business plan, which is really all about driving the uptake of biotech across the various sectors to the benefit of the Scottish economy. And remember, we're still at that point where we are the main delivery vehicle for Scotland's national plan for industrial biotechnology, which has the goals of trying to drive 200 companies in IB or IB users and 900 million GVA in growth. So we're trying to deliver that, certainly. And I was really pleased that we got some great people join the organization. Some of you will have met some of them already, but enough to say that actually we ended up with 7 or 8 new staff, certainly in a sort of 6-month period, all of whom brought different skills and different approaches. And so I feel that the organization's really freshened up. And it's, in some ways, it's a shame that we're not operating in the usual way that we would have done this time last year. But having said that, I think we wouldn't have been as productive if we didn't have the skill sets that we took on, early on. So I'm really pleased. And we did decide to do a little bit of reorganization, Caroline, as you were suggesting. So we basically turned some of the terminology and the responsibilities around a little bit. And so I was very keen on not having business development, which makes it sound really like a commercial drive for business, but it was more about business engagement. So the terminology changed. The team from the scale-up centres that sit within Strathclyde and Heriot-Watt University actually joined the business engagement team because they were outwardly facing, and then all the project-based activity was within that team as well. Now, the other side of that was we had Ian Archer as our technical director. And what I saw for Ian was a particular role in working across the organization at a strategic level. And so he's been working really hard in the various aspects of what we're trying to deliver, and it seems to be working very well. In reflection, the skills activity that we'll maybe touch on later performs admirably. We strongly believe in the importance of skills, not just, we have a cohort of over 90 PhD students, all of which are co-funded by business, but it's not just about the PhDs, although they are important and impressive. We've got master's levels, influence degree programs, and work our way all the way through to colleges. So, and ourselves take on apprenticeships and such like as well. So it's about that continuum of skills, and Rachel and Elba, and who deliver the skills agenda across the organization, again, work really hard to make sure that the experience that those students have as part of IBioIC is different than just a PhD student working in isolation in a laboratory in a university somewhere. So we really believe it is a cohort, and so we support them in that way.
I think that so there's been the restructure and the changing skill set. I think that the pandemic this year, we won't focus on that too much, but just an extra point from the point of view of leading the team during this time for remote working on one hand, and any actions that you've taken to support this network during this time as well, while businesses sort of aim to carry on as usual.
Yeah, I mean, I think your first reaction is, to support your own team and your organization to get it into a fit state that you believe everyone is working well and effectively. And so once we had that, we had a good look about how we could support our member organizations more strongly. And so what we came to was the delivery of a fee holiday. So between September and December, we agreed that people's renewal date would be pushed back for that number of months, for 4 months. So it gave people a chance to evaluate what their organizations looked like during COVID. We also did a few free activities as well, such as the beer tasting, this type of event, the social networking, and also next year, what we've decided to do is, because we'll be running the conference fully virtual, we've decided to offer that up for free, and we'll send out more details obviously as well. So if you've not registered for the conference, please have a look at it on the website and do so. We'll be running for 2 half days on the 10th and 11th of February, so it's slightly different for us.
Yeah, so that's available to register for just now. That's gone live this week. So moving on, the green recovery is referenced by leading politicians and throughout the media. What does it mean for IBioIC? Can you see it as something that the IBioIC will and can support?
I think the green recovery is very clearly an opportunity for IB. The other side of it is that I see what we're doing over the past few years, and really what we're doing is transitioning out of core IB into more wide bioeconomy. And so there are aspects of sustainability, circular economy, carbon capture, all coming into the mix. So that is a huge opportunity for us. And we know that the bio-based industries have a lot to contribute to carbon footprint reduction and net zero carbon targets. So that's where we'll be going with that one. It was quite pleasant to see that we were actually mentioned in the Scottish Government's inward investment plans explicitly in assisting some of the investment that they're trying to capture globally. So always happy to support them with any major opportunities for people coming into Scotland. And I think that that if we make the correct environment and we are able to display that we are a country that has an appetite to grow the bioeconomy, I think the inward investment will come, but it needs to start indigenously first. And so the things that we're looking at for green recovery are around generating robust supply chains using biomass and bio-based processes. One example that's been happening, I wouldn't have believed the advancement that we've seen in the last 12 months, but what started out as a conversation around sugar beet production in Scotland has really gathered critical mass, and Ian Archer and Lindsay Dunbar and Debbie McCreath have really been involved with a lot of that, and Ian driving it all the way back into the farm, so to speak. So I think if you'd have said to Ian last year that he'd be standing in a field growing sugar beet in his wellies talking to a bunch of farmers, I think he would have probably shaken his head. But that's actually what has happened, and the Rural Innovation Service has funded a trial in conjunction with James Hutton Institute and ourselves, and it's been evaluated if we can grow particular sugar beets, and obviously high sugar content sugar beet. And that then gives you some critical mass to then talk about the scale of biorefining in Scotland. One of the statistics that is fascinating is that Scotland blends 50 million litres of ethanol into make unleaded petrol at E5 level, and not a single drop of it is produced in Scotland. All of it is imported from France. And as we go into discussion and consultation about the requirement for cars to move to E10, which is 10% ethanol blend, you've got to ask yourself at what point Scotland needs to decide that it controls its own supply chain. And of course, with Brexit looming, having your entire ethanol supply coming from France, you may wish to question that over the long term, or any other country for that sake. But these are the sorts of questions that we're having conversations about, engaging with government, engaging with farmers' unions, engaging with farmer co-ops, and of course talking to investors to see what the appetite is like, to really put some significant investment into this space. Not just Scotland, but the UK is one of the few countries in Europe that has not invested significantly in biorefining. And I think now is the opportunity, whenever we've seen the fragility of supply chains post-COVID, to say, our main message is, local short supply chains using local waste or local biomass to produce high value products to the benefit of the country without the need to ship them all around the world. And we do have that technology and that ability to do that, but we do need the economic drive, and we need the scale to make it work.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So yeah, sugar beet and the green economy are two important sort of opportunities, I guess, in 2021. Do you see any other big opportunities for IB?
I think yes. Something that the audience might have picked up on recently is that actually the Falkirk and Grangemouth growth deal was agreed. So it's £90 million, and 40 million of that is very likely to go into a sustainable chemicals innovation campus based in Grangemouth, where there'll be demonstrator facilities that organisations can come and participate in programs to evaluate their technology. Grangemouth is the singular largest emitter of CO2 in Scotland, so it's no surprise that the focus should be there. But really, we talk a lot, I think, in terms of renewables and the green economy. We talk about offshore wind, we talk about wave power, hydrogen. The reality is that if we don't decarbonize the entire industry or manufacturing industry, that needs to come. So that's the area that we'll be focused on, although there will be aspects of carbon capture and utilization more broadly, of course. So that is a big one. The other one is we recently resubmitted a bid to UKRI to form a bioeconomy accelerator for Scotland, building on some engineered biology platforms into scale up using our scale up centres, and then into a demonstrator scale facility at Grangemouth. And the idea there was that it would build a unique platform for Scotland, and it would give the companies and academics an opportunity to tap into that expertise and facility. So we don't know whether that will be successful or not, but we have the backing of some from significant organizations, and even I'm delighted to say that some of the larger petrochemical industry representatives have engaged more strongly this time, and are very supportive of it. So yes, there are some big things in there. Equally, I think we have a number of opportunities which are exciting in terms of strategic partnerships and relationships. So we continue to work closely with Zero Waste Scotland, which is a very important relationship for us. We also are working for Scottish Enterprise in the delivery of the Bioeconomy Cluster Builder, which is really a project where we can focus on penetrating the range of sectors that we feel industrial and biotechnology can be utilised in. So whether it's the food sector, energy sector, marine, aquaculture, agriculture, all these different activities. This project is to enable us to really focus on that with some dedicated activity, and report back on what happens to Scottish Enterprise, obviously. So we're very pleased. And it also links well with a couple of other cluster builder studies that are underway as well. So there's one on advanced manufacturing, and there's another one on blue economy. So you could imagine that we already support a number of marine and aquaculture related activities. And so it's a great opportunity to build on that. The final thing that I've got really excited about was the fact that we engage with the Scottish Edge, which of course is the entrepreneurial competition that's receiving amazing press in terms of its ambition and what it does to support early stage entrepreneurs. And so we put some funds in to support that, and we were delighted to find 3 of the companies that were fundable and had been deemed successful under the Edge competition, and so we'll be supporting them. And the interesting model for Edge is that the funding that we put in is not a grant as such, it's actually a loan. So it goes in to support the companies, and then at an appropriate time it comes back. So we get the opportunity to reinvest, assuming that the company progresses into its first few phases of funding, obviously. So that, that's exciting. We're doing quite a lot around entrepreneurial support, which we're really pleased about. Early stage companies, academics that are looking to spin out. We still have our relationship with the Royal Society of Edinburgh on the Enterprise Fellowships. And so there's a great opportunity there. The final one I wanted to just highlight was a really strong relationship between IBioIC, CMAC and CPI. And so we're working with them on a project called Scout, which is basically Scottish outreach for innovation support. So we're trying to engage with early stage companies, whether they're pharma, life science, chemicals, environmental tech, the breadth is there, and try and support them at an early stage with innovation clinics, and also using CPI's tools, the innovation integrator and other methodologies to help them. And this is really appropriate for really quite early stage companies, or those academics that are about to spin out. And so we're really pleased to be working with them as partners. The relationships have always been there, so it's really nice to work with them on that. So those are some of the things that have been kicking off this year, and I'm really confident that we'll ramp up in the coming year.
Yeah, that's what I was actually going to ask you next, about the collaborative and strategic partnerships and projects. So there's quite a few ongoing, but something else that sprung to mind there when you were speaking is just how industrial biotech touches so many different sectors and different fields of academia and areas of political interest as well, I guess. So how does IBioIC look to bring everyone together there and working towards the same sort of goal?
Yes, I mean, in terms of when I talked about restructuring, I talked about it in quite general terms, but a decision I made quite quickly was to appoint a public affairs manager that I saw as pulling all the messaging together. And obviously some of you have encountered Debbie McCreath. And I've felt strongly for some time now that we communicate very well as an organisation, but we need to communicate at a higher level and be more influential. And so I think we've been doing that very effectively this year, and hopefully, the audience will have picked up on some of the news feeds and the stories and things that we've been putting out there. So we've used some of that to start positioning ourselves as to the benefit to other sectors and engage some of the other sector organizations to open doors. And I would say so far, the vast majority of those sectors have been very welcoming in terms of at least engaging to find out more. And whenever we explain, some of the examples of things that are relevant to them, they get it. And, it's that level of messaging, whether it's a simple infographic for lay people that don't really understand, think it's a highly complicated, innovative technological space. They would never be able to understand the technology. I think our team are particularly good at breaking that down into bite-sized chunks just to bring people on the journey, to let them understand what the benefits are, what the risks are, but also that, in some ways, some of the technology is highly complicated, and in other ways, it's really quite simple with very low risk. So it's just about, I think, engaging in that way. But our public affairs activity, I've felt, has been very good, and it has also helped us to build stronger relationships across Scottish Government and civil service as well, which of course is critical if we're going to drive any change for Scotland. We've had meetings with numbers of ministers. We've had ministers coming on site whenever they could to visit various activities, and some of the member organisations have been great in opening their doors to help explain what it is they do, and it's not a black box, and engage very strongly. And there are other things where we get an opportunity to engage in a wider audience, like the Holyrood, the Scottish Government cross-party groups. So we've presented at some of those and received really positive feedback as well. So, we're doing the outreach. We're trying to be consistent with our messaging. So I think that is much stronger now. We're much clearer about our position in moving in to be the leading organisation in driving the bioeconomy for Scotland. And so that's where the future is certainly taking us.
One of the other aspects of IBioIC is the skills programme, and we've seen recently how education's been impacted in schools in Scotland to quite a great extent by what's happened in the last year. How have the IBioIC studentships and skills in further and higher education landscape been this year?
Yeah, I think we all acknowledge that it's not been the best time for students at university, and particularly for those students joining new universities or institutions or courses. So certainly within our host institution, I've seen Strathclyde work particularly hard to try and support the students, and they won't be alone. There'll be those activities happening across all universities. But one of the things that happened because of COVID was that our BBSRC collaborative training program grant, which was due to be renewed, there was a stopgap because of all the activity around COVID. So we were able to ask for studentships for this year, and then we go back into competition next year. And we were feeling ambitious, so we asked for 15 studentships, and the competition has just closed, and the applications are being assessed. But so far it looked like we had about 35 applications, which is the highest we've had for studentships. So I think nice to see that COVID hasn't impacted as significantly as we thought on the innovation agenda for the companies. We also welcomed, I talked earlier about our cohort, and we make them feel like that. So they do joint activities together. They're kind of branded as IBioIC cohort. But we also work with East Bio and Criticat, other initiatives. And we've welcomed 6 of the Fuji Diosynth Biotechnology students into the program as well, who we have a strategic partnership with Fuji. So it's pretty good. Last year, I think, saw a record-breaking pass rate for our master's program. I think there was nearly 60% had distinctions from the 23 students. And also we had to maneuver a little bit because the master's program has an excellent placement that happens, an industrial placement, and some of those couldn't happen. In fact, all of those couldn't happen in the end. And so we needed to find alternative ways. So we gave them desk-based research or university-based research, and that seemed to still inspire them enough, despite the disappointment of not getting into industry for that period of time.
Great that they managed to adapt from the lab projects to do research, and they all did some really great work there as well. So so that was good. On the scale up centres side, how have the scale up centres fared during 2020?
So so the scale up centres, as with everybody, once we went into lockdown, they had to safely shut down and exit, and I'm pleased to say that they returned in July to bring in the various safety measures and adhere to the policies of both Heriot-Watt and Strathclyde University. We also brought in some more experience into the team as well. So we brought a senior fermentation scientist that came in from industry to help firm up that activity. And in 2020, we supported a range of different companies with projects. So there was companies like Kewney, 3F Bio, Green Bioactive, Oceanium, and we used the IBioIC Scale Up Accelerator Fund to access FlexBio, one of our facilities. And as we go forward, we will continue to spend on the innovation funding. So last year, in terms of our budget spend, we spent 1.25 million of our budget across the various activities. So we had funded projects to interface with the scale-up centres. We had strategic leadership and development of value chains, skilling the workforce, accelerating commercialization, and then the whole cross-sectoral engagement initiatives as well. So that's really where we've spent our funds. And we've also partnered up with other UK-wide initiatives as well, and we continue to deliver some of the European programs that we're involved in as well. And I guess looking to the future, it would be nice to know with some certainty what will happen around the agreement with Brexit. Certainly looking at the news this afternoon, that's not progressing at any great speed. So it'll be interesting to see when we get to the end of December what we're left with.
Absolutely. There's a question actually in the chat there from Lindsay relating to that on the post-Brexit question. A post-Brexit question. It's likely there will be less European funding opportunities for IBioIC, its members in Scotland. How do you see us working with the UK to continue to achieve funding and develop collaborative projects?
I think from what I gather that there will be an injection of funds for the UK research base. Whether that happens, that was obviously a statement that came out well before COVID, but it remains to be seen whether that will still happen. But there are still some excellent funders and initiatives around. You know, Innovate UK continues to fund businesses and academics to some extent. UKRI is still ambitious in terms of funding the bioeconomy topics. And it looks like there'll be a continuation of the NIBs, the networks in industrial biotechnology and bioenergy, of three of whom I think we work with in partnership. So there are still opportunities out there. Of course, there are a whole range of other investors as well now that are interested in environmental technology, green technology. And so I think I think we'll probably see a surge now coming on the back of a change in appetite based on net zero. So already we're seeing private investors having more of an appetite, where before they may have gone for drug discovery or, fintech or something. Now some of them are looking to build portfolios in environmental areas. And so there's an opportunity here, I think, as well, to position companies working in our space to talk more about the environmental impact, as well as the great products and processes that they've got.
Mm-hmm. There's a question also from Avro Gold at CPI, addresses some of that there in where you responded to the last question, but how different do you think the support ecosystem for life sciences companies will look in 2021 post-COVID, and well, hopefully post-COVID and post-Brexit?
Yeah, I think, for the last 9 months and probably the coming number of months, if not years, the main drive for research funders is to prioritize topics that relate to COVID across all aspects, and that's no surprise. But I think there is an opportunity still, because the net zero targets that are set for Scotland for 2045, we still don't really have a roadmap for how we're going to get to that. And so there will need to be funding put into the R&D and the translational aspects of that. So I think the landscape will be different, but whether that is more greatly affected by Brexit and the implications of what that means for the amount of funding that Britain will put into research and development, or whether that's down to prioritization of COVID, it's quite difficult to see at the minute. All I know is that we have a number of organizations in our network that have certainly pivoted and have helped the COVID response. And in fact, even ourselves now, we've been supported by the funders to flex a little bit and help where we can. So you might wonder what IB actually can do for the COVID response, as you may have heard on the news, but the reality is we are biotechnology, and the skill set of the team are entirely appropriate. And in fact, we've been helping the Lighthouse Labs in Glasgow, the testing facilities, in partnership with Scottish Manufacturing Advisory Service and Forth Valley College, to think about how they set up training. And of course, the recent announcement of one of the mega labs, so-called mega labs, coming to Scotland, we need to be ready. And so we have a network. We have some, as we've talked about, some really fantastic students coming out. Not all of them are PhD students. They don't need to be for this type of activity, but we need to think about how we're going to train them and who we're going to work with to try and deliver that, so that we are ahead of the curve, because trying to get that scale of testing up and running from a standing start is hugely difficult. And certainly our team have been engaged quite strongly in trying to support that, and will continue to do so. And the other thing we've done is we've managed to fund a couple of projects that were organizations that did want to pivot and try a new approach and a new technology that they may have in their portfolio to COVID. So that's entirely appropriate as well. But in terms of the answer to Avril, I think quite difficult to see the amount of money that UK Treasury and therefore Scottish Government have had to put into supporting COVID and supporting business. I would like to hope that there's still some pennies at the bottom of the bag to support research. That's absolutely critical in the innovative translation of it.
Thank you for that response. We've got a couple of other questions in the chat. There's 2 or 3 questions there, which we certainly have time for. From Alan Birrell, who is interested in our connections and collaborations outside of Scotland and the UK with other centres with similar mandates.
Yeah, so we have a number of European initiatives that we're engaged with. So, there are very significant IB activities in particular countries around Europe that we are tapped into as well. We have some formal Horizon 2020 projects that we're partners on as well, some around marine biotech, others on a range of different things. One is looking at mapping out biomass material and what can be done with that biomass in terms of conversion. The other thing is we do link with particular organizations as well. So there are other organizations somewhat similar to us, and we've hosted visits to share best practice. So for example, from a biorefining community in the Nordics, so we had representatives from Finland, from Sweden, from Norway come over and participate in the conference and share best practice. So we do reach out, certainly, and we're very keen to continue to do so.
Good. Another pre-submitted question that we have from Julie Millsdale from Perceptive Communicators. What are Mark's top 3 priorities for IBioIC in 2021? If we could narrow that down.
Yeah, I think if I'm honest, the ambition is there to actually hit our 2025 targets within the national plan next year, because looking at where we're at against those, I have great confidence that we'll do it within the time, and we'll do it greatly within the time, in fact. So we'll continue to deliver that. For us, we need to be seen as the bioeconomy expertise within Scotland, and so we're all about collaboration, not competition. So I'm very keen that we work alongside other partners and collaborators to get the most out of this for Scotland. And things could be around carbon capture, could be around marine activities, energy generation, whatever. But we all have a part to play as part of the bioeconomy, whether it's against net zero or whether it's against development of new supply chains. So we'll continue to do that.
We have a question from Jenny from IBioIC. In what industry do you think biotechnology could have the biggest impact in the future? Do you think there are any sectors that could benefit from innovations in biotech that haven't actually fully embraced biotech yet?
Interesting. To be honest, there's probably a biotech that is appropriate for most sectors. Mm-hmm. We've interfaced with. I guess here's a snapshot just to make people sort of think about it. There's companies out there that are actually making construction materials using industrial biotechnology processes. There are people making polymers from shellfish waste. There are all sorts of people generating opportunities, all of which will have a slightly different offering to different sectors. For example, we heard about BAM in collaboration with Strathclyde looking at microbial ways of filling in cement fractures within nuclear reactors or large concrete structures, which is just incredible when you think about that sort of activity. So there is something for, I wouldn't say something for everybody, but there's something for many sectors. The sectors I believe that we will penetrate further, I think, is the food and drink sector, and obviously the distilleries and the alcohol producing sector, because fundamentally they use a biotechnology to produce their product, but there are opportunities to harness additional value streams from that as well. And we've been looking at whiskey co-products as well in terms of how more organizations can benefit from some of the waste. So I think as was coined, one man's waste is another man's gold. I'm not entirely sure it's gold, but certainly it's a higher revenue generator than being purely waste. And we've got people working on coffee grounds to fertilizer for soil, and there's an amazing plethora of the one thing I would say is, if we're going to make this work, we need the backing of the government. We need to make the environment attractive for organizations to do it in Scotland. because what will happen is we will do fantastic science and research, and then when it comes to scale up and manufacturing, we will go overseas to do it, and then the likelihood of coming back again is pretty slim. And there are other industries that have seen that happen. So that is the importance of using local indigenous materials, starting materials, because that will ultimately anchor you here. And the other note, I think, is an ambition to drive into manufacturing. So absolutely critical. Doing fantastic research is one thing, but we will never hit the GVAs that we are looking for unless we drive into scale and drive into manufacturing. And we have a number of organizations that we're working with that have done exactly that. You know, Celtic Renewables in the process of building a very significant biorefinery. There are others like, you know, Scott Bio bringing on a GMP facility for niche products, and you know, MyAlgae looking at manufacturing as well. So there are organizations and the likes of 3F Bio who are doing a lot of their development and pilot work in Scotland, but some of their other manufacturing overseas.
So another question in the chat is, does the panel think that the biggest area of impact in the short term is biorefining to low carbon transportation in the heavy goods fields for new fuel options? This will have the biggest impact in the short to medium term, but hydrogen at scale is probably in the medium term still.
Yeah, I think it's probably a fair comment. I think when you look at any reports that come out about industrial biotechnology, biorefining is there. You know, it's always up there because you can do it at scale. You can use the initial feedstocks that you've got, produce your, whether it's sugars or ethanol or whatever, and then you can take them further into higher value products. So that tends to be there, and it's the one that actually has lowest risk because other countries around the world do it. So it's really about an economic position or an environmental position based on net zero, for example. I think some of the other fuels, hydrogen will come eventually. I think, like you say, it'll be a midterm. What Scotland is certainly looking at is the offshore wind and offshore wave and renewable energy generation there. But in terms of fuel, we can see that there are industrial biotechnology companies working at really high scale. You know, Argent Energy supplying biodiesel from waste fat and oil products and really horrible stuff, and making fantastic biodiesel for fleets of vehicles. We'll have obviously Celtic Renewables, you know, with their biorefinery as well, and there are examples of others. But yeah, I think so. I think it'll be a while. I think hydrogen will come eventually, but yeah, I think we're quite close to what is an established chemical industry approach to it. So the ethanol that we produce is no different than the ethanol that's produced via refining.
Mm-hmm. Isabel Vincent put up another question, comment on the scope to decentralize biomanufacturing away from the central belt.
Yes, and if you take some of the feedstocks that we would be considering, I suppose there is an opportunity to certainly look at that. And you could imagine that there would be small biorefineries around various regions as well, if that was to work for particular feedstocks. But if you take the forestry aspect as well, you know, making forestry products and turning them in through biorefining into higher value products requires a lot of manipulation and technology to get it to that. However, there are organizations and companies around Europe in particular who are successful in doing that. It's just the drivers that we need in place for that. But there are other feedstocks that would be more amenable to establishing a stronger value chain.
we've got quite a few more questions actually, but we'll need to, from Shawen, do you think there would be a surge of funding in global IB sector post-COVID, given the green energy call?
I think, I suppose if you consider that pre-COVID, Europe had already agreed the Green Deal in terms of putting a very significant amount of European budget into supporting IB and green technology. So that sits there. Whether we will be able to access any of that or not, I guess, remains to be seen in the coming weeks. I think there is more of an appetite, certainly, to look at these types of technologies from investors. I don't know enough about some of the other countries around the world, what they intend to do. But I suppose you would like to think that everyone's on the page in terms of what we're trying to achieve, from the Paris Agreement.
Okay. What do you think's driven the growth to 747 million turnover for IB in 2019? That's quite an achievement.
IBioIC.
Absolutely, that was a simple answer to that one. Moving on.
Next question. The reality is that there is a drive at the minute. There's no doubt about it that more people are building businesses based on issues around environmental impact and sustainability. You can see from last year's BioCity startup company report that Scotland was disproportionately higher in those new startups being established in, I guess, IB touching areas, sort of environmental technology, clean tech, agri-tech, and core biotechnology. So it's not my place to say that IBioIC have driven that, but I think if you have an organization that's acting as a catalyst to joining up the pieces, helping with funding and working across everybody in collaboration to the benefit of Scotland, then you would hope certainly that you would see the benefit. And I was delighted to see some of the figures being generated this year. And long may it continue. Let's drive this into a new industry, which is what, Build Back Better. We have an opportunity to rethink our supply chains, and so that's what we should be doing in Scotland.
Absolutely. I think it's been really interesting from the point of view of things have just kept moving, kept going with remote working. I think everyone's just, maybe not initially, but I managed to adapt very well to working remotely and carrying on with business almost as usual. And obviously we've got the conference scheduled for February. What can people expect from the conference? It's 2 half days of online activities.
Yeah, we've taken some advice from the membership about what works for them, because I think all of us have had days where we've sat in front of computer screens just staring at some online conference that run online as it would have normally done in person, which isn't exactly what we want to get to. So after discussing it with the members, it was clear they wanted some flexibility and they wanted something they could drop into, but also get on with the rest of their day job as well, because it is quite challenging to engineer in the physical networking, which was critical to the success of our conference in the past. And so this year, what we've decided to do is run the 2 sets of sessions each day. And you'll have a mixture of live and recorded. You'll have an ability to go back and access that material at a time that you find conducive. If you want to watch it with your feet up and a glass of something, that's fine. If you want to sit in on the live sessions and just do them as they happen, that's absolutely fine. And I'm hoping that we will engage more widely by offering this up as a free virtual activity, and it will hopefully entice people to come and engage a bit more strongly. And at the start of November, all of our innovation center network, so there's 7 innovation centers in total, we work together to deliver climate change conference, because it is the sort of big topic that all of us can justify, you know, doing something about. And so we delivered that, which was a one-day conference, and we ended up with 2,600 delegates at that. So, you know, I would love to see our conference grow as well, to entice people to come and find out more.
There's certainly an opportunity for that with it being online. Yeah, we have an actual online poll, which we are going to put up, just to see what the key benefit of being a part of IBioIC is. If you could just, you know, select what would be the main advantage to being a member, just for us to get some feedback there. We are coming up to the end of the session. I'll give you a moment to complete that. Thank you. I see quite a few responses there. It really just leaves for me to say thank you so much, Mark, for responding to all those questions being bombarded at you. Thank you so much for all our attendees for coming along and taking part today. As I said at the beginning, we will publish the event online next week on our newly launched IBioIC website. So I think it leaves for me to say thank you. Have a lovely Christmas and New Year, and we will look forward to seeing you at the conference online in February, if not before.
Yeah, thank you. Happy Christmas.
Thank you very much.